Hey guys, my name's Chris. This is Financial Fitness, and my new friend is from Romania. He lived through the hyperinflation. Well, it wasn't hyperinflation, but it was high inflation, and he's really got a lot to say about what is coming, what I think is coming to America. I hope you enjoy it. Kind of let him talk me through this, and we can kind of learn from somebody that's actually lived through it. No, it wasn't the reserve currency of the world, and our dollar's a lot different, than that. But I imagine they're saying the same things. They're posturing the same way. I'd like to just go ahead and get into it. How are you, buddy?
I'm pretty good, thank you very much. Yeah.
What what I know you're all about helping people, and that's really cool. And I really appreciate you coming on. And what is like the number one thing? How do you like to start off when you're trying to teach?
What I do on my channel is try to view economic policies and hyperinflation and just whatever's happening in the world, global policies from the average man's perspective, just from the average Joe's perspective, what he can expect, what type of consequences some of these economic policies may have on his life, because really we should be focusing on things where we have power, right? Because if we are paying attention to the news that we don't write and really don't even participate in that much, then we are taken out of context into a world, in a scary world, where we feel powerless and then we don't do anything. However, if we look at the global policies from the individual's perspective and what he can expect, then there are definitely things that we can do to prepare for changes and major economic changes. So I always try to come from a very down-to-earth average man's perspective, what some other countries went through, what our country went through, and who did well and who did very badly in these situations. And hopefully that way I can help my viewers and your listeners.
Yeah, I bet you can. We're approaching high inflation. Um, if we see hyperinflation here, I'm thinking it might be transitory. Hey guys, smash that like button and spread this message out if you don't mind. And if you like this kind of content, please subscribe. Let's keep going. Thanks for watching. What's going to happen, I feel like, is they're going to try to roll out this CBDC and really cover it up. But anyway, how does when you hear Jerome Powell talk, when you hear him jawbone about how this is, transitory and there's nothing to worry about, we got it under control. Were they saying those same things?
Right. Well, it was a bit different in our situation because back then in the 80s, Romania was a communist country and really part of the greater Soviet bloc. And things definitely felt that things are moving and changing. However, nobody really expected the fall of the Soviet Empire and what the consequences will be for that. So in that sense, it was very different. However, it is somewhat similar because now we're talking about the US empire, really, and its satellite states. And as soon as the edge of the empire starts crumbling, that is how you can tell that something will happen shortly. That may be years, of course. However, when we are seeing the problems in Lebanon and Turkey and all these other countries, which are really the edge of the US empire because they are connected economically and monetarily speaking to the US empire. If these states and if these countries are crumbling, then that means that something will change eventually in the center as well. So there's always articles put out or these talking heads on the media that try to calm everyone until the last point, so you're not prepared, so that they can take advantage of you. Because really, a change is usually an economic change, an economic shift that is happening, and the consequence of that is hyperinflation. In our case, when Eastern Europe or the Eastern European bloc was crumbling, we went from a communist country into a really free, I should say, almost libertarian country for a very, very short period of time, and then into a socialist economy, but under capitalism. So we went from communism into capitalism, really. And during that change, that transitional period, we had the hyperinflation. So when governments tell that something is transitory, well, it is transitory. A 5-year, 7-year hyperinflation, like it was in our case, that's transitory for a government because governments tend to go on for a long time. However, the effects of it will be permanent because, as later we found out, what Powell meant by transitory is that the acceleration is transitory, but the effects are permanent. So that means inflation used to be, I don't know, maybe 3%, then it goes up to 20%, and then it continues with 3% afterwards. However, you just lost 20% of all your savings, and most likely your wage didn't go up 20%. So the loss is in the purchasing power, which translates into really the quality of life being lost and being lowered. So that will never come back.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned, if the inflation rate goes up 10% and your wages go up 10%, on average, your taxes go up 15%. I thought that was really interesting. It,
Right. So when people talk about inflation, they usually talk about everything going up. When it's only just the produce but not wages, then it's really stagflation. So we are going into these terminologies now, but what really is happening is the purchasing power of the currency being lost, right? So even if your wage might go up, if you had savings, that probably did not increase 10% or 20%. So just with that, you're on loss, right?
right. Yeah, savers are definitely losers. There's no way around that.
If you're saving currency, yes.
Right, right.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So you said saving currency. I love it because we save real money. I'm sure you do. How? I was going to wait to ask this question, but I can't wait. How did gold and silver perform, and was it able to do its job?
Well, again, our situation was in Romania a bit different because we were a communist country and holding gold was actually outlawed.
Oh,
Any type of form, even wedding bands were outlawed, and you had to have specific permits and permissions, and there was paperwork, and then you had to have it done by a government approved jeweler, and there's a waiting list and so on. Now, that doesn't mean that people didn't have gold, but it wasn't really available. The black market was, of course, there, and gold had its purpose even during communism. However, the price of gold during hyperinflation shot up multiple times of its own value, even more so than keeping up with hyperinflation, which would have been enough. However, there was also a need, and the country was lacking gold. And whoever wanted to kind of scramble for anything in order to save whatever savings they had, really one of the best options for at least the average people was gold and silver. Silver was not outlawed. However, it was very hard to get, investment grade silver. It was more like silverware. And even that was kind of hard to acquire. You could bring some silver into the country, but it was a very, very different world. So I'm always amazed that the liberty that we have in the United States, that you could just walk in and buy gold, because that was very alien to me. And people don't do it. And it really amazes me. Your whatever wealth you have now through a economic calamity into whatever new world is coming after it.
yeah, I call it insurance. It's you
Yes.
have insurance on your health, you have insurance on your car. You need to put insurance on your wealth, and it only costs 10%. Just put 10% and don't think about it. Dollar cost average, unless you really see it coming, like you should. If you don't see it coming now, you're not paying attention. And that reminds me, if you guys could hit the like button and share this video with somebody that's got their head in the sand, because we are the inflation is nowhere near 7%. The CPI is an absolute joke. It's a cherry picked basket of goods that is manipulated, and just don't even look at it really. Just know it's way closer to 20 than it is 7. Uh, and uh, and if anybody wants to, I have a link in the description below to SD Bullion, and they have a wonderful selection of silver and gold. It's right there at your fingertips. Just check it out and think about it. It's starting to tick up today, as a matter of fact. Silver's trying to do something. That has been the most amazing thing for me to watch, is the precious metals just sit flat. It's just unbelievable. We have been talked out of it. You were saying earlier how you couldn't believe you could just go to the store and swap currency for gold and silver. Back to your story. How was work when people were working? And, if you look at, a lot of people like to look at GDP as far as how a country's doing. I kind of like to look at unemployment. That's really the backbone of what's happening. What was it like during this inflation?
Sure. So it's very different. So hyperinflation just means that the rate of inflation is so high that things start breaking down. However, just with the CPI, if you'd actually look it up on Wikipedia or somewhere, Romania technically on paper never had hyperinflation, because in order for that to happen, I think monthly 500% has to be. However, just with 20%, which could be calculated from today's prices going up, you have to look at that really compounds after years. And what I usually count is prices doubling. So that is how I counted Romania's inflation, because that is more comprehensible. If I say 700% or something like that per month, or what does that mean? What I try to measure and what I try to explain to my viewers is that what you should be counting is actually time, and how long does it take for something to double in price. And that is more comprehensible for humans, right? So if it's a 20% increase year over year, that means roughly 4 years, everything will double in price. So if it's a 7% increase, that means 10 years, everything will double in price. Now, in hyperinflation, in the 7 years that we went through in Romania, we went through 13 doublings. So roughly that means that if you had 10,000 Romanian lei in the bank, and it got locked, of course, because it gets locked in as soon as a major calamity happens, and it gets put into a savings account, and you get access to it in 3 years, 4 years. So technically, if you never had access to it and you take that amount out, what it purchases is roughly the amount of $1. So if you had 10,000 Romanian lei in 7 years with so many doublings in prices, it would be purchased $1, 1 Romanian lei. So technically it would mean that you would be purchasing a loaf of bread. So that is really the speed of hyperinflation, high inflation. This was called high inflation, never hyperinflation. For hyperinflation, you have to take a look at the Reichstag mark or the Hungarian penge or Zimbabwe. But at some point, it really doesn't matter, because all you need is 2 or 3 doublings in price, and you probably lost that way. You lose 75% to 80% of your purchasing power. At that point, we're really counting, breadcrumbs. At that point, it doesn't really matter how many doublings it goes through, especially if your saving was locked away. So this is a very different environment. You can see in this environment, very few companies can survive, because you produce something, and by the time you sell it, for the amount you can sell it for, you can no longer even produce the same exact thing. So the question is, what do you sell it for? How do you even calculate what the doublings will be next month, next year, and so on? Especially if you have a long production line, you can't. So what happens? Everything freezes up. So production, industry, everything stops. And the only thing that you can do is consume whatever's available. So joblessness goes through the roof. Handouts from the government really don't purchase that much, because by the time the checks are written or issued out, it really doesn't purchase that much. So you scramble for anything and everything, and basically you are in survival mode. And that's what we had, at least for the first 2-3 years of this. And after that, some people kind of manage through this, because you try to cut out middlemen anywhere where it's possible. You try to grow your own food from your own community and somehow make it through. However, we were asking for jobs. They were pretty much non-existent. And even if they were, it was just there on paper. You still had to work after that, or make something in order to make a living.
So it really was. Wow, that's hard. It's hard to think about because there's so many people that use the dollar. How was currencies? Was there people trying to swap these currencies for different ones? See, in the I talk about this book all the time. It's called When Money Dies. It was written.
It's a very good book, yeah.
Yeah. Um, they were swapping currencies when they could. Was there a lot of that going on?
Well, people try to swap currencies but the issue is, if your currency, everyone knows that your currency is going to zero, who wants the currency? Who is the other person that will trade for it, right? Well, technically, there are people who will do it, who want to speculate, because there's always good news that this is it stops now, and next year everything will be okay, and the Romanian lei will go up and something like that. Even if you take a look at Lebanon now, then their hyperinflation, there was always, news coming out that this will stop now, might as well go back to the old currency and so on. And it does make sharp turns back, which only last a couple of months, and then you get sucked in and more cash is printed, and then you lose even what you had. So anyone who is smart doesn't try to fall to these deflationary traps, because through the hyperinflation, there are kind of cycles and there are short-term deflations that are happening, but you don't know if that is the last one. So it's very hard to trade currency. However, so when we traded, when back in the 90s, the euro wasn't there yet. It was the German Deutschmark, and that is mostly what was used. So we had the privilege of having other countries around us, at least on the same continent, where their currencies was not falling, and we could use that as a proxy. So even today, if you go, and this has been entrenched so much in the Romanian consciousness that even today, if you go to Transylvania or some parts of Romania, you see that real estate, cars, or some other assets are listed still in euros. It used to be Deutschmark. Because nobody trusts the local currency anymore enough that you make a listing, and maybe that listing will be there for a couple of months, but by that time the currency has fallen. So you have to go and update all the time how much you want for that house, for that car. So of course now inflation is not that bad, but the memory is still there. So if you go on online, listings, you can still see most, or actually many, most of the people still list cars and other assets in euros and not in Romanian lei. So that was kind of there for us. However, the exchange rate was so bad that, it was hard to deal with it, because a couple of Deutschmark would have bought you rent for a month. Like how do you even use that in average day exchanges or bartering? So that is why people still traded back the Deutschmark into Romanian lei, which would be like tens of thousands of Romanian lei for a bread, and you would count that out, and then as soon as you could, you would exchange it back to the Deutschmark or US dollars. However, US dollars was a bit hard to get by.
I bet. Yeah, you would trade it for smaller denominations. I see that. Okay, so I talk about food all the time because we're having tremendous supply chain problems, and they're getting worse, and they're spotty right now. They're just kind of a pain in the butt at the moment, but they're about to be a real problem. And what was a meal? What was a average lunch and dinner? How was that?
For us during hyperinflation,
Yeah,
what we
yeah,
could eat?
right.
That's a really good question, a very specific one. I like it. So we basically, our family survived on potatoes. We grew potatoes. That was the main course every day, all day, every day. So potatoes and lard and bread. Basically, that was it. So, for instance, what eventually we had to do, and many people had to do, is move out of the cities because there was no food around in the cities. So you would have a relative or someone out in the country. And back then, Romania was still very rural. The farms, the local farms, everything was intact. So everyone had at least one relative that had a cow, had some pigs or something like that. And they could move back, and the city emptied pretty fast, and everybody moved back and started working on the fields. And that is what we did as well, and started working on the potato field that my grandfather had. My grandfather did die, but my grandmother inherited. So my grandmother, we moved back to our grandmother, and that we started, producing food whatever we could. So milk was still there because you would have relatives who would have cows, milk. You would make cheese. We grew onions, potatoes, corn, and bread. We had bread, and meat was very scarce because it was really hard and expensive to grow animals. But yeah, for dinner, I mean, many times we had a piece of bread with lard and salt, and that was it. Maybe some onions.
It goes back to family and community. Isn't
Yes,
that
very
crazy?
important.
Yeah, that's really incredible. You've got a great story. Uh,
Thank you.
yeah, this is going to help so many people because the situation is different now. I mean, it's different. It's a much bigger problem in my opinion. There's way more people, and there's several things that could happen in our supply chain that would really people would be hungry in what 3 days probably. Um, I really was water an issue. When I talk to these, I'm not really a prepper channel, but I feel I am somewhat. And I talk to people, and they're all about water, water, water. And I've got a water well. It's not that big of a deal. Was water an issue?
It was to a certain degree. However, after communism, again, water was really government run, or if it wasn't, it has to be taken over by government because you cannot make a profit on water, at least during hyperinflationary times. So the government will print fresh currency every day, all day, and try to make the water lines and the electricity lines working as much as possible. Now it does break down and break down often. However, in 89 we went through the revolution in Romania, and the revolutionary spirit was still there. So government kind of tiptoed around, wanted to make sure that another revolution doesn't happen. People don't go out with their weapons on the street. So the water was water was kept up as much as possible. Electricity kind of was there on and off. You could not rely it, but the price of it was so high that um, actually I had one job I had was later on during the end period of hyperinflation, was actually reading water meters myself. And I remember going into the families, and they were saving water or trying to make the faucet drip so the clock wouldn't turn, and then they would
Oh,
get
wow.
fined or something like that, or collecting rainwater, or people would wash their hands in various like things that they could collect water in, and they used the same water on the toilet because they could not afford to flush the toilet. So it was kind of bad. But to be honest, Romania was fairly naturally still rich, and we had wells outside. In my city, there were kind of 7 community wells that people could go to, so they would carry water, or even us at some point, into their apartment. There would be long lines. It wasn't that bad, but you can imagine the cost of it went up quite significantly. So if you had a well on your property, that would have helped you a lot. And it really became a pain point in your life just to deal with water, which now we take for granted because we turn on the faucet and it's there and it's affordable. Suddenly, if the price of water would, increase 20-fold, you would think differently about water. But it was there on and off. The revolution never happened again. It would have if water would have stopped, for sure.
That's a level of poverty that I can't wrap my head around, to try to not be able to afford water. That's heartbreaking.
Yes, I mean, I have stories. People would take the same water, and the whole family would have to bathe in the same water one by one. So, I mean, you can imagine how bad things get, and I don't want to go into graphic details, but we had enough rivers, we had enough wells where people could get by.
Right. I have not heard you mention chickens. Chickens is the prepper's favorite. Everybody has chickens. I've got 25 of them.
Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of a pain in the butt, but I'll eat a lot of eggs. And we enjoy them. Is there, I imagine food for the chickens, laying pellets would be extremely costly. They're already expensive. Back then, how would that work out?
Well, as I said, even everyone kind of had a relative who already had somewhat of a homestead, not necessarily a farm.
Okay.
So they were kind of, as we moved back, our relatives had chickens and pigs and so on. So if you're on a farm and you grow corn or you grow other stuff, you kind of are able to grow chickens. But just so I can compare it, chickens eventually became a very good commodity to have, where we used it for barter. So a live chicken, let's say you would go to a doctor, and the pay for a doctor's visit and probably the treatment as well was one live chicken. And I remember that we would be on the hallway waiting in a line for a doctor's office, and people had their chickens with them. So, and we would use that as pay, or one day's worth of work on cars was paid with 2 5-pound sacks of potatoes. So the food price goes up significantly. And when we hear these horrible stories in Venezuela or Southern America where people really do bad things for a can of tuna or something like that, and that's not because they have lower morals. Well, eventually, I guess, after living that in poverty, but really the cost of it is so high that it's worthwhile for them. They have to do it because they have no other option.
Yeah, that's yeah,
it's
hard.
very important to have the infrastructure or the land or whatever you can have now in order to grow chickens, grow some type of foods. Root vegetables is easy to store. You have to think about storage. That was probably the hardest part, but yeah, you have to learn canning and all of the rest.
Yeah, and we have a big garden, and I talk to people all the time. You need to start trying to go get garden. Start getting the ground ready, and start try one, because you're not going to be able to flick some seeds in the ground and have a good garden. It just doesn't work like that. There's a lot of learning curve involved. My first 3 gardens were failures, pretty much, and and you learn from your mistakes, and you go on. So the climate's way different over there. potatoes, and what was the main crops?
Well, Romania has three major climates. We have mountains, we have access to the sea. So, based on where you live, either in Moldova, Transylvania, up in the mountains, every like you might be well off with corn in some areas. We lived in the mountainous areas, so for us, it was potatoes, onions, and those type of things. But however, if you go down to Dobruja or some other parts of Romania, the crops were very different. We tried sunflower seeds for oil and that sort of stuff, but that didn't really work out for us. It was better for us to barter for vegetable oil and other stuff. So for us, really was the option was raising animals, potatoes, and some other stuff you could grow in mountainous areas.
Wow.
Cabbages was the big thing for us. Yeah. So it depends. You have to look at your environment, what works best for you, and try it out. Try it out now because it has a learning curve. Even if you don't, if you cannot do a full, if you cannot fully live off of it, you cannot be fully self-reliant on it. That's fine. Try even if just in your backyard, try it out how to grow stuff, and hopefully later on you can buy a couple of acres and get on with it bigger and bigger. And as long as you have the seeds, the means for it, you can do it later. Because I know it's very, very hard to be self-sufficient. It's almost impossible unless you live in a community.
Yeah.
Or get started as soon as possible. And don't try to think that you will be able to barter for food. Yes, you will be able to barter for food. However, you will pay a very high price because a lot of people in the community say they are saving silver or cryptos or whatever in order they will be able to barter for food. Yes, you will be, but the price of it will be so high that it's just not worth it. It's might as well buy food now. And food is a commodity, and when you look at charts of the hyperinflation in the after the First World War in Germany or Hungary or some of these countries, you look at real estate price going up that high, the stock market going up that high. Yes, it was going up that high compared to their currency, but compared to food, it was actually falling. So that might be that, compared to food, even silver and gold might be falling if you are going hungry, and you will trade anything and everything in order to just survive another week, which we had to do.
Yeah, you got to ask yourself compared to what on everything. You got to think critically about everything. And
the price of basic necessities will skyrocket in a hyperinflationary situation.
It's so hard to get what you would call prepared. You can only just have, so much food. I recommend 3 to 6 months, maybe a year. If there's not many people that can do more than that.
Well, that should be enough if you have a homestead or something else where you can start growing food. And back in the 80s, we already had shortages in communism, and there was enough suffering where people knew, and it was kind of understood that you should always have a fully stacked pantry. So when we went into hyperinflation, actually most of Romania was prepared. They didn't even know it was named prepared. It was just life for them to have at least 3 months worth of food in their pantry, in their wherever attic. It was different types of houses where you could store food in the attic or basement, or we had root cellars, and that was life for us. However, now if you go to the average American house, you can just compare the size of the pantry with the size of the closets, and you can see how well they're prepared or not.
Yeah, I'm telling you, buddy, there is not. I would say, I hate to even guess, maybe 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 people that have enough food for these people. Most people around me live paycheck to paycheck. They have no earthly idea what's coming, and when I try to talk to them about it, they don't want to hear anything I have to say. They don't want. They want to hear about rainbows and fairy tales, and uh, and I really don't want to be a doom and gloomer. But I just don't see I don't see what would be wrong with having a little food. You know, that's the basic, just the most basic thing you can do. Just have a little extra food. And what if we have a cyber attack? The World Economic Forum has been promising us a cyber attack.
It will happen if they promised us and the other thing, and that happened, and now this, and it will happen for sure.
Sure.
Real
So
or imaginary, it will happen for sure.
yeah. So I know I'm missing all kind of questions I had for you. Is there anything you'd like to say that people need to
Well,
hear?
I don't, well, just to kind of answer or add to your thought process that people don't want to hear. I know exactly what you're saying. And even in Romania now, the younger generation or even my generation are not really interested in it because, well, it does bring in pain points, you know, and painful memories for us. So we would rather not think about those things. However, what I want to achieve is that bring this back to normality. You know, back if you look at the length of history and how people have lived throughout history, we were never ever so dependent on any system that we are now on our own food supply, government, internet, name anything. We are very, very dependent, and that's how we live. And that should not be the case. You know, that should be the normal thing to have food in your pantry for a couple of months. You don't have to wait for a apocalyptic situation. That should be normal. It should be normal that you have ways to defend yourself. It should be normal that you know your neighbors, you know your friends, you have a community, you listen to your grandparents' advices. That should be normal. Unfortunately, we have been pulled out of this normal life into an unnormal life where your closet is filled with clothes you don't even wear, and the pantry size is 2 square foot. That is not normal. Yeah, we think it's normal because that is the lifestyle we are living now. So we need to turn back to a normal, which is actually what has been normal throughout history. So just talking about traditional lifestyle, just without the fear, without the doom and gloom, that should get us into a situation where if something happens, we are better prepared. Because usually what changes happen is political or economical changes that happen. If you are put out to the system and you are very dependent on it, you have no bargaining chip that they will tell you what will happen, and you will, the only thing you can do is nod and say yes, thank you. However, if you have food, if you're prepared, if you have other ways to barter or go around and defend yourself with a community and a larger uh, family and so on, then you may have a say in what's coming. Hey, I don't want this system that you're trying to impose upon me. Let me vote the right people in. Let me run for office or something like that, and you will have a bargaining chip in order to have some say in what comes next.
That's very good. Well, I really appreciate you coming on with me, brother. It's been my pleasure for sure.
Sure thing. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to talk to you.
I'm going to leave the link to StarPath Academy in the description. And is there anything else that you want to put in the description?
That's it. You can find me on YouTube at StarPath Academy, and I'm looking forward to talk to you more next time.